Hello and welcome to the Touch Embroidery Visual Manual. Touch Embroidery is an Android app which does embroidery and provides a variety of tools. I will be going over these tools today. All right, let's get into this. I'm going to load up Wallaby. So we go to load. I'm going to do embroidery files and select the Wallaby. This previews the embroidery. Layers are up here. This is how we would select an item and deselect them or access some of the additional tools. Our first tool is pan. It's the hand tool. We can move in and out. We can zoom in. Also, if we go into settings, we can allow rotate. Tapping with 3 fingers will restore the view to default. Turning rotate back off. The important thing is that pan doesn't ever change the image. Next up, Sketch Tool. Sketch is one of the most basic drawing tools. It's basically what you see is what you get. It's designed to do angles, like sharp angles, really well. So here's an example of that. There are no options or settings for Sketch. Slightly more advanced, we have the Draw Tool. Draw Tool has 2 different modes. It's this little pen tool. You'll notice that this work is connecting to the previous work so that it doesn't introduce a cut. Let's show that in action. See how it connected there? That's the reason for Draw Tool. Next we have Delete Tool. It's this little X. There are 2 different modes for delete. The break breaks the layer by deleting the point no matter where it is. When you remove break, it simply deletes whatever point it goes over. This often lets it recreate the layer, but if we delete all the points, it will remove the layer. See that again. However, if we go through an area that has points that just get recreated, it deletes the layer and then has those points restored. Next up, let's go over Smudge. This was actually the first tool introduced in the earliest version. Basically, it's sort of like finger painting. It moves the points according to the smudge amount and the smudge proximity. So messing with this, we get a slightly different distance from the center versus the amount moved. But you can use this to shift the points around and sort of sculpt something that you want. You'll notice at the center it moves all points equally. And if we put the smudge proximity all the way down, it creates a sort of fisheye effect. Next, let's go over Smooth Tool. It does the same sort of thing, but it puts the points closer to their average point. So you can have a greater and lesser effect here. But it basically will remove the sharpness of various turns. So this part where we did draw, it can smooth that out. We can turn up the smoothing on the options here. This will smooth it out. Same thing here for the rest of it. And like most area effect tools, it has a proximity. All right, next up we have Squiggle Tool. It's basically the opposite of smooth in that it creates a randomness in the work that we did. So rather than have uniform lines, we have a bit of randomness applied. In options, we can modify this and we can bias it in various directions. So here, since we have a strong left bias, it moves to the left. Here, because we don't have a bottom bias, it will move to the top. All right, next up we have SpiralExpand Tool. This is another area effect tool. but it has two different values, basically the amount of expansion or contraction and the spin amount. So if we modify it by changing the angle proximity and the expand proximity, we can modify how the tool affects our work. You'll also notice the center area effect has little lines that sort of show what its effect should be with the red, black, and green. All right, well, let's go over Satin Tool. It's the first of the fill-like tools. Now, Satin does a direct line, and anything that's selected are used to define the outline, but it's instantly available based on the area you put it in. So let's sketch out something here and then use our Satin tool to fill this area in. Now you'll notice that it's very dependent on the angle of your finger at that particular time, which makes it a little bit problematic to use. And like most of the fill-based tools, you can change the distance between the lines, and it will change how heavy the fill is. All right, next up we have the Fill tool. This basically works the same way, except the line you draw is from your start point to your end point. So all the lines are parallel, and it's less dependent on the direction your finger traveled at that precise moment that it kicked in. So let's draw a little face here. And when we select it, we can fill it in with lines. Now let me select the eyeball. And you'll notice in the eyeball that it missed some section there. So let's go ahead and go to our Draw tool, which allows us to connect things. Let's make a connection there. So now it's a closed shape. Now if we go back and remove that, we can draw this again with the Fill tool and connect it all the way with a complete connector. We can change the density and get a much more close, dense fill, like so. Next up, we have Eulerian Fill. This is a slightly different way of filling things. And rather than use the defined context of the filled shape, we can simply draw the outline and it will fill that in. So let's change the density here, draw another eye, and you'll notice that there's no outline. It's simply a single fill line. So I can draw a different smiley face complete with this tool. If you change the angle, you'll notice that it's now going in an angle rather than the same flat fill. And you can do this to add in areas that get filled. Attract tool is another area effect tool, but it attracts points to each other or to the nearest point nearest to them. This is a sort of processor intensive process, so it's a little bit limited at places. So let's find a good place to test this. Now let's select everything, I guess. Now if we do the fill, you can see that the little green and red are the only place being affected. This is because the processor intensive nature of the tool. Let's go ahead and go to another place and make our own. Now say you wanted to make these lines much more closer together rather than do them the more difficult way, we could just apply an attract tool and it will attract the points. There's an interesting factor in that the attraction factor, if you put it negative, it will repel the points, which creates a fairly interesting pattern as the nearest point to it is used to push the point away, and it creates a interesting side effect, but still might be useful for art. Next, we're going to go over a bean tool. It's one of the later ones developed, but it's basically a normal sketch tool. But it has an interesting effect in that everything you draw is connected, because it contains not only the path forward, but the path back within it. So anything you draw and connect with the bean tool does not require cutting the thread. So if you notice here, the beginning and end points are overlapped. So if we draw little outgrowths here, these are part of the same layer, and simply modify it. If we change the distance, you can see this effect more pronounced. You'll notice that it has the forwards and backwards command. So it goes out and back in the same thing, so it keeps the principal topology the same. And let's undo a couple of those. It has full undo and redo ability. Okay. Next up, we have a rather large section tool. Pattern is a draw type tool. For example, here I'm doing a zigzag. This is the default in pattern, but if you hit the Z option up there, we can change the pattern that we're working with. So let's go ahead and go in here. Now I chose a random pattern by hitting the little random button, and then I can draw this pattern on our work. There's also some predefined patterns inside the Z here. For example, here's touch embroidery as an entire pattern. So let's draw a touch embroidery pattern, and you can drag and proceed. Now let's say you wanted to modify this pattern. We could go in here and say select the U, and let's go ahead and change the position of the points a bit. Let's pick and drag these points down a bit. Now this should be below the main line. Now if you draw here, we can notice that the U in touch embroidery is now our modified U. Next, let's go over shapes tool. This has a variety of different shapes. These also connect by default as best they can. So if you draw a star here, and then you draw another star next to it, it will connect, making it into the same shape. Same for the polygons and the lines. So if you needed to connect something with a straight line, you can find that in shapes. It has a rounded rectangle as well. A square. Square will let you change the angle. So rather than a required thing. Let's oval will also work, but the connections are a little bit strange there. For circle, the way you change it, it allows it to create circles in any direction. Best way to see these is to try them. Next up, we have ribbon tool. This was originally based on a bug, but is one of the larger sort of tools. So this is simply one ribbon that draws stars. So if I load up ribbon tool, all of these are different ribbon tools that are defined by their program. So in this tool, the 2 points follow. The middle point is the control point for a Bezier curve. If I load up a different one, I can have the 3 points drawing themselves and tracking each other. Similarly, there's this other one where they're looped together. You'll notice that they each have a code line after them. That's actually the code that defines the ribbon itself. And we can quickly and easily make sort of intricate geometric art with this. There's also several other ones that are quite sort of useful and weird. For example, this one, the faster it goes, the more it expands. Here's another one of these that's smooth, but is somewhat based on speed, but they're a constant distance apart. If you go to touchembroidery.com, there's a description of how these are made, but it's rather in depth. This one is a sort of calligraphy tool. There's other calligraphy tools in here, so let's try one of these. So you would draw something, and then it would look like a sort of calligraphy looking thing. There's more tools here. Let's try smooth calligraphy. This does the same sort of thing, except it smooths it out, so it's less based on your finger location, because it tracks it by a little bit. Here, let's do bendy, where it will allow it to bend slightly. That provides a slightly different effect. Let's see what's else. Yeah. Let's find a blank area since I'm drawing a lot. Here's the original star tool. Go ahead and do smooth shell, I believe. There's a lot of these tools, and a number of them are quite interesting. They basically define any sort of tool that can be done in a ribbon-like pattern. And the topic is pretty large, but if you wanted to make your own tool, that can be done. There's a plus thing here, which allows you to enter a name for it and the command sequence, which would take a bit of research on touchembroidery.com, but I have a number of these already defined, which do fairly interesting things that sort of show the effect of the kind of path-like programming language that it uses to define what all of these points are and the connections between the points. So it's a rather large topic, but you can just select one and play with it, and then they're perfectly fine. So these are the various like little sub-rake tools, etc. They define little programs within the ribbon itself. All right. All right, next up we have Insert Point Tool. This is a lot more straightforward. We are inserting a point into whatever we draw. So this is just a single point-based tool. We'll look at the specific point tools later. Now, related to this is Move Point Tool, which does the same sort of thing, except it creates points while it's moving. So you can create lines this way by moving the point and having the points be created. And next up we have Tug Tool. This is more interesting to play with than it is to actually use for any proper purpose, but you grab a point and all the other points will follow it, and it keeps the distance between the various points equal, so you can unravel some of your stuff this way. Not every tool is a winner. Some of them are simply added and kept in because there's no point in removing them. Finally, we have Text Glyph Tool. This basically allows us to enter text into the into Touch Embroidery and have it provide us with the text on screen as a set glyph. So let's type in "Hello, Grandma." All right. Now we select it. Now it won't actually invoke until we hit the checkbox. Let's go ahead and fix this misspelled hello. And enter that in. And still missing the H. So we can change it around until we decide on the correct spacing and hit the button. Let's go ahead and just add in a second H here so it stops eating that. Okay, now we have hello grandma. Now this will create the closed shaped glyphs. So let's go ahead and put this up here, hit checkbox, and let's go ahead and fill this in with one of our layer tools. So in layers, when you do a fill layer, we will go ahead and let's find hello grandma again, and it's located here. Oh, it has a second thing. Okay, so I entered into this layer, looked at it. Now I'm gonna go ahead and exit back out. Looks to be the correct layer. Okay, now I jump out of the layer here, and let's go ahead and say, okay, if I want to fill this in, because I just don't want the outline, I want everything inside it, I go ahead and find this, and I select it, and then I hit the loop button, and then I hit the fill button, and this does a fill of hello grandma. Okay, so it had the first thing still selected. So let's go back to text tool. Let's put in another hello grandma. Let's select it. Now we go here and we hit loop and we hit fill. And now it created a hello grandma, which is filled in. So since we're looking further into layer tools, let's go ahead and mess with this a little bit. You'll notice that all these have little buttons. So say if I wanted to delete everything but a layer, I can go and select the layer and I can lock it. And let me go ahead and lock let me jump out of here and lock the entire layer. So I select it and then I select the little lock button here, and now it is properly locked. So now when I go to the top and I swipe everything off, it will only delete the unlocked layers, which is everything but that. Okay. Let's go ahead and go over Sew Simulator next. The Sew Simulator is exactly as it seems. So I have hello grandma, and it shows what it would sew like. There's an option up here to play. You can also mess with the pull bar, which will show you precisely which parts are going to fill in. While it's playing, there's a couple of different view modes. So let's turn that on. It's the little location button at the top. Okay, now it will track the location as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And then it shows us with the center point that it's adding being front and center. Now if we select it again, there's another selection here. This will, when it goes off the screen, recenter to the center point. Okay. Next up, we have Spin Mirror. This will allow us to create many copies of something modified at a particular angle. So this is the widget that we're actually modifying. This will change the angle. We can also change the number of items we have in the spin by moving this part of the widget around. And we can zoom out to see what this will look like. These don't actually take effect until we hit the checkbox. So let's go ahead and do that. Now the widget is gone and we actually just have this many copies of our hello grandma spun around. However, this is very large. You can see here. Let's go ahead and go to layer tool really fast and see if we can put it into our original hoop. It's currently locked, so let me unlock that. Okay, now select everything and let's go ahead and move it into the size of the hoop. The hoops are so that we can tell how tell whether our project is going to properly fit the current work. So when we zoom down, we see that it's 56,000 stitches, as we can see in the layer. These points are probably too close together to be useful. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. All right, let's go ahead and recreate something so that we can keep going. I'm going to go back to text tool, and I should still have my previous text. So I'm just going to hit OK. And let's put this here. And let's go ahead and do the fill procedure we did before by selecting the layer, making sure that it's looped, and adding in the fill. So looped layer can fill. Okay. Now let's go over the patterned it. Okay, that was a little weird. Okay, just undo. All right, let's go over the next item in our thing. Let's go to Stitch View / Editor. Now this is a separate mode, so this is mainly a single point mode. So all of these will be point tools to both visualize and go. You can hold the button down and it will allow you to move from one to the next. But basically you are moving individual points and they're much easier to visualize in this mode. So if you have something slightly off and you need to fix it at the very minute level, this is a very helpful mode for that. We can also insert points, which allows us to jump to the next area. So if you wish to draw things with just a straight running stitch, you can do this. We can also delete points. If we hold down the delete, it will keep deleting points as our entire thing unravels, which is a sort of entertaining thing to watch. All right, exiting back out. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Now let's load up a Wallaby again, and then I'll show you Stitch View and how you would use it specifically for something like this where things are very close. You can hold this down, you can keep moving it around. Basically we switch to move point mode, and then we can just adjust the points very minutely in a sort of wireframe mode that lets us see what's going on to a much higher degree, especially at the point level where we don't usually have that sort of fine grain ability. Okay, color chart view. This is another view type. Basically it displays the colors we have. So if we say loaded something up, remember this is from a Pez, so it has a brother thing. Let me add in a second thing. Now when I color this by going to the color at the bottom, let's go ahead and say this is Garden Rose. Now when I go to the color view, it shows me the colors used and the color changes and in what order they occur. So if you loaded up a design and you want to know what the sort of color things are, that's what it'll do it. Okay, let's go more in depth in the layer commands. We previously saw these, some of them, but not very in depth. Okay, so when you double click on this, all of these buttons do things. For example, this is flip horizontal, this is flip vertical, this rotates clockwise, this makes it larger. Let's go ahead and shrink it down a little bit so it can fit in our hoop better. And this here is short stitch remove. It looks like the two little A things. Snap to grid. There's also a pattern button. You'll notice that this also says touch embroidery. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this. This is touch embroidery from earlier. It actually took this from the pattern tool. So if we go in here to the pattern tool, we can change this to, let's go ahead and get a predefined square pattern. So let's go ahead and undo our previous changes. Let's select this again and hit Z. Okay, wait, that kicked in the touch embroidery again. Okay, let's undo that. Okay, we have the tool drawing. Okay, let's go ahead and clear that out. Let's undo. Let's try again after drawing a little bit. Okay, definitely selected. let's go ahead and apply pattern. And now it has the little square things applied to our wallaby. Now this is a little bit fuzzy and weird, so let's go ahead and undo that. Okay, next up we have cut and paste. Let's go ahead and show you how this works. So let's cut. Okay, now since we've cut this out, we have it in our local clipboard. So let's go ahead and select the main root node here, and let's go ahead and paste it back in here. Okay, and next up, let's do stop command. We add in a stop command. We can add in a stop that will end up in the actual resulting thing. So I pasted one of these in. Okay, now a single stop command is a little bit weird, so let's go ahead and move this here. All these layers can move. So now we have a one wallaby followed by a stop, then a second wallaby. We can change the visualization here. So this will either show or unshow the wallaby in question. All right. Here we have it locked, and then if I delete it, it will fail to delete because I locked the main layer. Let's go ahead and unlock that and go ahead and delete everything. Paste another one in because it's still in our clipboard. Now let's go ahead and go over internal files. Our clipboard is itself actually a file in the local application. You can see the undos are also here. There's a limited number of them, but there's enough. All right, next let's go over the various widget tools. Now, widget tools differ by actually being on screen. Let's first do Fractal Widget. These actually appear within the scene. They usually have a checkbox saying that you're actually done or to continue on to the next thing. So here I hit random and it creates a random fractal, which looks a little weird. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. Let's create a random fractal. Hit random a bunch of times. Some of them are much larger. This looks sort of interesting. Let's go ahead and hit this little circle button, which says iterate, and then see what the fractal looks like. And okay, let's just do some more random ones, and then iterate this one. Didn't do anything cool. Iterate this one. Basically, it's just randomly picking a L system fractal and then iterating it as we go. So let's go ahead and select this one. Now let's go ahead and go back to fractal, and then let's show you some of the predefined ones. These are all the predefined fractals. These are sort of well known in mathematics. Here is the here's a particular type of flow snake. All right. Next up, let's get rid of this and let's go over the next fractal on our list, which is Cyclocycloid. This is basically a sort of spirograph widget. It's one of the sort of Victorian drawing machine-like things. All of these have the various aspects. So if we move this is the R major, this is R minor. So this is the outer ring that goes around it. The degree step is how often it's sampled, since we still have to draw straight lines. This is how many times we go around in the both circles. We can also select one of the variables by tapping it and then move very slightly so that we can find when our lines overlap in a desirable way. So let's say we find this and we say it's beautiful. We hit the checkbox and now we have this. Let's go ahead and change its color with the color changing and make it ochre. All right, so say we love this widget, deselect it, looks beautiful, we can sew this. And it fits in our hoop perfectly fine. Okay, so next up, let's go over Pintograph. This is a different type of machine, slightly different physics, but the same general idea. You have all the various aspects of it, and you get to modify them. So here I'm just going to hit random a couple times. Let's go ahead and change the rotation here. Let's change the wheel distance, the arm distance, how far and close the sort of scissor effect things. You'd have to see the machine to understand what they all sort of do, but for our purposes, you just know that they modify the machine and or modify the resulting image in particular ways. So we can change the rotations. Let's go ahead and random some more. Okay, let's say oh, this looks great. Okay, let's keep this. So say we love this super much. Let's go ahead and accept. Now, a lot of these are sort of overlapping. Let's layer tool and put it back in the center. Let's go ahead and remove the short stitches. Okay, now we know that this is probably sewable. All right, so let's go over the short stitch and how that actually works. So the short stitch removal requires that we define what a short stitch is. So in settings here, let's go up to the top. Okay, so within settings, we should be able to modify at the very bottom what we define to be a short and long stitch. And once we predefine that, we can hit short stitch remove, and then it'll remove what we defined as our previous short stitch. So let's go ahead and enlarge this. We can change the color with the color button, which picks a random color rather than one of the selected colors. And perfect. Say we love this. It's great. And matches some of our threads. Okay. Next up, let's go over the hoops. The hoops are basically just there for your convenience. They don't actually affect anything in the actual design. But if you have a certain size hoop, it makes sure that we know that anything we put in it can properly fit in the hoops. So we have all the predefined hoops. So we know that it can almost fit in this hoop, and so we can move it up a little bit and see that it falls out of the side of the hoop there. So let's go ahead and move this a little bit, select it, move it up. Okay, so we can tell that it fits inside our desired hoop size. Okay, next let's, here's all the predefined ones. Now we select this first item, it actually creates a custom hoop. So let's create an inch based hoop with a rounded rectangle. And let's go ahead and say it's 5 by 5.9 or whatever. And then it creates our custom hoop. So this is the hoop that we have just defined. So if you have a specialty hoop that isn't predefined, you're still covered. All right, move widget. This is a widget tool that is more for help. So whenever you touch it and hold, it'll change what your thing is doing so that you can zoom out. The little blue square is your view in a zoomed out fashion. So we zoom here, we can move all the way over. If we tap it, we can move its location. So yeah, so you tap it to move the location, you can move around. It's really helpful if you're super zoomed in. So if you're really far zoomed in and you're just modifying the points here, you can tap it and it'll sort of zoom out and let you see where you're going. And so you can modify one little part here and move around to the next parts as we need it. We can just click and hit the checkbox and get rid of it. Next up, grid widget. This is basically what you'd expect. You turn it on and it gives you a grid. So here's the thing with the grid. In case it's a little bit cumbersome, you can turn it on and off. It's just basically a grid background. All right, image widget. You go to the image, you load up an image, and you can you get the image, you can move it around, you can adjust its size to position how you want it. This is just a guide for you, so you can adjust its transparency and just say okay, and then the image will simply exist in the background. So say I wanted to draw this, so I load up, say, a sketch, and I try to sketch this eye here and this eye, and let's draw this nose and draw the mouth. And this is what it is genuinely for, is tracing the outline. Okay, so I just released that. So let's go ahead and switch to Draw Tool so that these connect properly. Let's draw this way. Let's get down here. Actually, wait, I drew the shirt. Let's go ahead and delete this now because it doesn't quite... I was drawing the face, not the thing. Delete that. Switch back to Draw. And then finish with the sort of chin thing. Okay, and it doesn't save anything in the image. It doesn't do anything else there. It simply lets you see what the tool is. So if we say wanted to adjust these stitches at a sort of stitch level with our background image, this is what the image tool is for. So we can adjust these stitches to what we need. And we use it as a guide. All right, so let's go ahead and what have I covered? I think that's most everything. Okay, there's still design settings. So say we wanted to save this design and give it some various properties. Like, for example, we wanted to say our author and give ourselves credit for it. So I am David, so I type this in. And we say author is David. Now, this only really matters when we save. So if we go to save, share. Now, this doesn't matter for DST because it doesn't really save the author. But for a file type like PEZ, so long as we use version 6, it will save the author as a keyword, and then we just hit save PEZ, and it will save the PEZ with the author name intact. Okay, continuing with the image widget, if we turn on allow rotate again, then we can go to our image widget, which will let us modify the position. Usually we don't want to modify the position out of turn, but this, if we turn on allow rotate, we can properly rotate the image to our heart's content. Okay, deleting that. Let's go over view settings. These are the settings in here that govern what selected items look like and unselected items look like. So we can change the alpha of the selected and unselected items. We can modify the various things. So if we say let the selected points show and the selected endpoints show. Now if we change this and then we have only this selected, they look fairly identical because they are modified in that fashion. So let's go ahead and turn that off. And if we turn off the unselected items and the other ones, and let's go ahead and turn off the lines themselves. So now when we select an item, just one specific item, it will either show or not show. So if we say select just the nose or the mouth, it will show nothing since it doesn't show lines for the selected items. And yeah, basically you can modify the view settings there. Here again is the sort of stitch modification, so you can change the preferred stitch size. This is also in sort of settings up here. All right. What else? Gone over that. Yeah, okay. Uh, went over all these tools. Okay, that seems to be about it. Thanks for watching and enjoy using the program. It was a thrill to make.